Let's talk a little bit about accelerating UI development. I work for the Qt company, and we got kind of obsessed with what happens with GenAI and software development. We are powering 1 million developers. That's currently roughly. I mean, we're building UI framework, IDEs, other tooling for 1 million developers, 70 industries. So if you're your premium German car with a touch screen, probably powered by Qt. The ultrasound device in your medical dock, probably powered by the Qt UI framework. Your coffee machine in the office. Sometimes my colleagues say that it's hard in the developed world to be 50 meters away from anything else powered by Qt, because most of the touch devices, embedded devices, and some high-performance cross-platform applications like CAD programs, they're powered by Qt. So just to set the scene, we are and have to be obsessed about software development and what's next, because that's our core business, right? We are the biggest software company in Finland on the Finnish stock market. So we need to be obsessed about what happens. And I'm a product manager, and I have the fortune that I was allowed to play around with GenAI and what it does in the software development cycle, and giving as well advice and experience what happens in the area, with particularly with large language models and code generation. So I want to talk about that a little bit. So now, I mean, you know all about the GitHub Copilots, but of course the UI development and GenAI plays, at least in these three areas, a big role, right? UI design, code generation, we all talked about, we hear about. And then, of course, quality assurance is also starting to play a role. So we see that if you look around, and you will find applications that, based on human prompt, they will create the complete UI, right? You just say, create me an app for a kind of Airbnb kind of app, and it's able to write you a software application. The whole UI, different screens, navigation in between, they can do that. Well, of course, their marketing department was very good. If you try it out yourself, you will notice, okay, some human intervention is still necessary. You need to tell sometimes, okay, do this and that. So the world is not quite perfect yet, but you're seeing already where this is heading, right? In terms of UI design, it's already a revolution, going from a human prompt, just English language of what you want, and it starts throwing you the first prototype, the first ideation. So me as a product manager, I'm all of a sudden capable of potentially communicating my vision, what I want to do, even to the UI designer, just with a single prompt. And these things are happening. They're not perfect yet. If you try them out, you might be disappointed sometimes, but you see already where the train is heading. Of course, we all know next topics. Of course, we know that writing software is a thing that everybody has heard here, I guess, in the room about GitHub Copilot. Cursor's the next new kid on the block in terms of the coolest hype in terms of software generation. Very important. They're adding value, and we're going to talk more about that through my presentation. So that's an important area, and of course, for us as Qt, it's a super relevant area. And last but not least, also Qt is nowadays very invested in quality assurance. We are doing the static code analysis. We're doing GUI automation testing. So also we are looking in terms of, now GenAI can not only write unit test cases, but it can also write in the future maybe potentially GUI test cases. So writing your push that button, move that slider, change that stack. So these are three areas that there's a lot of happening, and these are the things that we're interested in. But you will notice that these are only three areas. This will actually, GenAI will impact the whole software development cycle. And we as a Qt company, we are just super interested in the part from the handover from design, let's say from Figma, all the way to the automation of the testing of the user interface. This is our core business, so we are on the right-hand side of the cycle. But you see already GenAI playing a significant role in other areas. And if you go over there to the ethical code booth, you will see the gentleman showing you how, for example, you can generate user stories. It will create you the security requirements. It does the DPO work and sets the task for those. So you will see kind of agentic solutions with a lot of different AI assistants now coming together and forming and accelerating the whole product life cycle. So where will that get us? I mean, if you think about building an embedded device like a cockpit, a car cockpit, a cluster UI with an IVI screen, that used to take 2 years. Right? Nowadays, the Chinese are doing it in 6 months. But anyway, this development of a touch UI for an embedded device, we have been moving from months. Now, really moving forward with agile software development and automation of different processes. We are moving into weeks of a single iteration, right? I mean, we know all the agile and sprints, so we can do things much faster. But this is all with the existing technology. This is how software has been developed for the last 30 years, right? Yes, we have agile, we have certain automation capabilities, but how will software development look in 30 years from now? I mean, we have done software pretty much the same way for 30 years. We have learned new things. We've made things a bit more complicated. We added a lot of things, code documentation, unit test creation, and we automated a lot of things, creating agile teams, being in small and big format a bit. But essentially, we are still doing the same thing I did 30 years ago in terms of software development. So where will we go? I don't have the answer, but certainly the iterations will be faster than weeks. Right? From the moment that you say that I want a certain UI to function, to having a prototype, to run that prototype on your actual hardware. This will be potentially within days, going away from months to weeks to days. We don't know how fast, because what's happening is actually rather interesting. There was a recent study from McKinsey that when they asked thousands of company employees or respondents, hey, who of you is using GenAI at work? Right? Oh, we have like 68%. Oh, cool, right? That's like the large majority. Almost it's 2/3 of the people saying GenAI is in. We're using that. But then the same McKinsey asked the people as well, how much of them are using software engineering? Okay, we lost a lot of one here. 13%. That's only a marginal fraction. So what happened? How did we lose like about 50% of the people that claim that use GenAI? Why aren't they? There's challenges. One of the things is, of course, GenAI is not aware of your product. Right? If you're into proteins, or if you're mixing paints, or if you're doing medical studies, or forecasting your retail automation, GenAI and these ChatGPT, they don't know your product. So for a lot of people that write the software, unless they're writing in Python, might not be the right tool. Let's say they have a bit more different languages such as Lua or COBOL or something else or Rust. All of a sudden, these tools for software and coding assistants are not that good anymore. So that might explain a little bit. But there's also a lot of companies that we talk to, they're worried about IPR leakage. Now, all these big players, whether it's Cursor, whether it's GitHub Copilot, Anthropic, they're all black boxes, right? You're routing your code there. You're giving them their code so it can predict what would the next line of code be for you. You're giving them your code so they can write you the unit test case. So they're all big black boxes. And companies that live from differentiated UI design, company that their way of serving their customers is their competitive advantage, they are for sure worried about. They all have played around with it, with GitHub Copilot, but many say, this stuff doesn't go into my production code quite yet. There's also another reason why they don't want it to go in their production code, because they don't know what's behind that black box, what has been done, and what training data has gone into these models. So will there be a challenge then in 2 years, 3 years down the road saying that, well, actually some of the code that your LLM generated is actually infringing someone else's patent. Even GitHub Copilot admits 1% of all responses is a direct copy from the training content. So you don't want to be in that 1%. So that's another reason of looking at these code generations with a critical mind. And maybe that explains why so few people are actually using it in the daily life in the code generation. But like I mentioned, we as Qt, we also needed to think about what do we tell our customers, right? What's the right model? So I spent a lot of time in the last 9 months of looking at different models and their capabilities. And I want to tell you a little bit about our journey in finding that one out, because I have that problem as well, that general AI models don't understand our product very well. So the Qt company has a product, that's the UI framework, and there's actually, we have a programming language called Qt Modeling Language, or QML. That's like HTML for touch devices. It's essentially just lots of button sliders, stacks, and they run very well, very efficient on devices with limited power capability, but it's also very easy to write. So it's essentially programming language. We have that. It's known by a lot of developers. Like I said, we have 1 million developers out there, but it's our language, right? It's a derivative of HTML. So now we need to check how good are these common large language models in terms of programming QML. It's like learning Finnish, right? How good can this large language model talk Finnish? Most of them will fail, some of them will be good. So we needed to study how good they are. So we did. So we created a test case, 100 tasks. Write me software for button, slider, mandatory text input field, a stack view, a busy indicator. So we created 100 tasks that are typical for writing a software, UI software. So we gave the 100 tasks, and then we did benchmark different kind of models that are out there. And what you see here is now StarCoder. This is, for example, one of the open source models. Then there's Mistral. And you see then the GitHub Copilot, which is certainly the market leader, at least in spread, in what people have tried and what is out there. It's nowhere close to being the leader, right? I mean, if I would need to suggest to a customer, hey, you want to pay $40 per developer to have an AI assistant? Well, I would point you currently to Anthropic's Claude 3.5 Sonnet because it's clearly better than GitHub Copilot in creating QML code. So we did study and test these systems in a quantitative method. How good are they? And you're seeing that already now. What's in everybody's mind with GitHub Copilot, not the leader. So I can't say that use this one. If you have access and can use for code generation, when you ask for code, use somebody else. And even you see the ChatGPT 01 preview, the next best to sliced bread in terms of chain of thought thinking and whatever, not that much better. Actually, like the original one, it's scoring just, I think, 2 or 3% better than the original 4.0 model. So the incremental improvements are very limited. But that's not the only thing that's in that chart. And that benchmark data, there's a lot of things we need to remember. And one of them is, guess how much European models are in there? So if the EU AI Act is coming really at a full force, there's going to be more of a battle between the US and Europeans in terms of models. I mean, now already we can't access, for example, the latest Llama models anymore because Meta forbids us. So what if Meta, Anthropic, and so on, they say in 2025 or 2026, well, you're not going to have any of our models because I don't like your legislation or your regulation. There's only one model in here. That's essentially Mistral Large. That's the only European French model. So if that kind of trade conflict would inflate and accelerate, all of a sudden we're down to one model, and in particular not the strongest one. But there's also another problem in there, in this chart, which is how much models are there on the list that we actually can figure out what has gone in there for the training data. Also one. And the StarCoder. That's the only one way you can check what's the training data that has gone in there. So you can be pretty sure that saying, okay, I like the code has gone in there, there's no IPR evaluation, or I don't like it. Problem is, it's actually the weakest one out of the box in creating QML code. So code for my customers. But that's the only thing that we have in terms of fully transparent, or the only thing European. So there's a lot in this chart. And things we need to consider when we are telling our customers what to use. But also, as they typically say, size matters, right? So this is no different. So, of course, the bigger, the better. I mean, this is a simple math, and we've tried it out, trying out the small version of a certain model series and trying the bigger. Surprisingly, the bigger one always does better. But there's also sustainability impact, right? Of course, the bigger the model, the more energy it burns, the more energy it consumes, but also the inference time. So the time before it can predict something is longer. So the user experience is, of course, weaker. If you have a mega big model like the Llama 70B, if you ask it something, it will take much longer to respond than if you ask a Llama 13B that is much smaller. So the inference time increases. So again, if you're choosing for your right model for your product, it doesn't matter, it doesn't need to be software, can be anything, what you need to predict, you need to keep these things in mind. User experience, transparency, fit to your legal requirement, and your actual quality of output, which is a lot what we can actually quantify in terms of our benchmark. So these are things we need to study. But of course, we then ask this next question. Okay, we found the right model. What do we do now next in terms of then how can we make it better, right? We are not the Meta company. We're not Apple. We're not Google. Haven't got like 50 billion lying around to pre-train a model of that size. So there's a model called LoRa fine-tuning. So essentially, it's like a fine-tuning on the last mile. So this is what we tried out. So just to see how it works. So we fine-tuned then For example, the Llama model or the European model Mistral, and you see how much better it gone. I mean, we got a 10 percentage point improvement. Maybe that's a lot, maybe it's not a lot. But if you think about how much billion of money Meta, so our good old Facebook and Instagram company, have put into building Llama in the first place in terms of compute, and then the few bucks that we put in there with essentially like a research project, we got up by 10%. So now we are coming with a fine-tuned model, an open source model like Llama, very close to what I showed you earlier, what these large models and the biggest one like Claude 3.5 Sonnet can do. So we're getting very close to these levels just by providing good data. And again, I think I've heard 3 presentations so far today talking about data is important. Well, yeah, absolutely. Because when we do fine-tuning, we're using 1 million tokens in terms of human validated and written code. So yeah, that's high quality code. So 1 million token is not much, but essentially you can improve the model performance significantly. And that helps. And again, this is again just for our product, right? When your product is different, like you're creating paint mixes or you're studying proteins or you need to predict whatever medical resolution or a forecast or a banking investment decision, again, you need to provide the training data. I'm just telling it from our point of view and what we can do for our customers. So is there a lot in terms of what we have learned in terms of actually quality of output? So how good is it, the QML 100 benchmark? Relevant for transparency, relevant in terms of legislation. You need to then think about transparency of where the training data comes from, and of course, the ability to train with additional training data. So there's a lot of dimensions that you need to think about when you think about just the code generation. Now you can multiply that issue, of course, to different use cases, right? I mean, if you want to create then unit test cases, if you want to automate the UI, if you want to create user interfaces for your industry, you need to keep all of these in mind. And you need to go through the same journey of benchmarking, identifying. And of course, companies like us, we will help you. But also the use case matters. What I talked about now, and everything result that I showed in terms of the coding performance is actually what is called the instruct performance, so the chat performance, right? I ask it, can you write me a slider for a user interface that is doing this and this and this? Well, in reality, a lot of code generation is actually not talking English, but is actually only talking code. And these are models that only can talk code. They don't speak English. But if you see GitHub Copilot suggesting the next line, the next button or something like that, that's actually then what is called code completion. And for this one, again, you did actually need a different model. So all of a sudden, our model that we looked at, like Llama 70B, being the best one for open source, and we found that, oh, that was not the best. So we had to switch model and go to Code Llama. Same herd of llamas. But we actually had to study in terms of, okay, now we need a different model for the different use case. So if I ask something, can you help me with this? So if I have a GitHub Copilot chat kind of experience and I'm asking it something for an expert advice, I need to use one model. But if I want to do code completion on the fly while somebody's typing code and suggesting the next line, actually I need to use a different model. So again, these are the things you need to learn. You need to think about use case. And then find the right model, because like we noticed that it's actually different for expert advice on QML and code completion on QML. We need to use different models because the big Llama model actually doesn't speak code. It speaks English, but it doesn't speak code. That's a problem. And here on my run-up model, this is my last inside information as well. You see a cursor small, like I mentioned. Cursor is one of these most hyped kind of coding assistant. It's really, really good. I mean, I don't want to down talk it, but there's also something funky in there. Is how is it possible that when I choose in Cursor, the only model it's allowed to use Cursor Small, which is their own in-house model, how come that Cursor Small has the same performance than Anthropic's Sonnet? 68%. That can't be considered. I mean, there's probability, right? I mean, always these benchmarks, you do them twice, you're going to get 1 or 2 test cases going to fail more or less. There's always some variation in there. So I checked the privacy regulations in terms of what's behind Cursor. And Cursor even says in its privacy rules and documentation that even if you choose to use only one model because you're comfortable for it in terms of transparency and who runs the data and who has the data, Cursor is allowed to route them anywhere else, and they will on your behalf. So I don't know whether actually they didn't use Cursor Small, which I had set up on the configuration, and they sent it somewhere else. But it was really the outcome. That is so close than the run-up and the best one in terms of the QML performance. So again, it shows us, and they honestly say that we will route it there where we want to. So if you own IPR and you want to be sure where your data goes, again, you need to just, am I fine with that risk? Am I fine with my data going anywhere of these 5 large language models or AI service providers that are behind Cursor, which is OpenAI, which is Gemini, which is Anthropic, and their own model? Am I fine that it goes everywhere? Potentially. You need to know, because they don't tell you. It's a black box. So it's a problem. So these are the things we started and just tell you a little bit about finding out more about large language models using code. But what about us people? I mean, product managers, software developers. What about the people, actually? I talked about models, and we are using, I mean, let's think for a second as well about the kind of model or people behind all this Gen AI and UI development. And of course, software developers, they don't want AI to write their code, right? So they can sit more in corporate meetings. Certainly not what the average software developer is looking forward to, right? They want to help with things that actually is not why they came into the business, writing code documentation, unit test cases. They want to focus on that, why they came into business, writing fantastic, innovative code. So this is, of course, confirmed also by studies where when you asked, over 20,000 developers what they want AI to do, Gen AI, they also said, 58% saying that, clear majority said that writing code documentation, test cases is where they want to have help, and writing software is the least where they want to help. Of course, it's biased, right? You ask the people, do you want to be replaced by AI? There might be a strong bias in there. But again, it's at least when you ask the developers, and if you have any in your company, you need to take their mindset into account when you talk about Gen AI, when you talk about accelerating that. And the same is about UX designers. They don't want to be just pixel polisher. They don't want that the product manager designs the complete UI and serves it to you. Could you then polish these buttons and put the corporate brand on it? Thank you very many. And these QA engineers, they don't want to deal with that flood of additional code that is being generated by Gen AI. They also don't want to be just on the losing end, becoming the next bottleneck in the whole workflow. So again, you need to think about when you implement Gen AI and accelerate your workflow, that you resolve all bottlenecks. Maybe you need to automate your graphical user testing. At least it's something you need to keep in mind. But is it worth it? I think yes. I mean, there has been now quite recently and finally some real studies, and I don't believe that the 55% productivity increasement that some coding assistant companies claimed out when they came out of the market. But there's been a distance, and the productivity gain depends on who it is. So for a novice developer, like a novice QML developer, the study is done by 3 universities in the US, just finished in September 2024, so it's rather recent again. They showed for new developers, people in universities that are new to a programming language, there's a significant improvement. It's over 30%. So that really makes sense. You can get on the learning curve much faster. So a lot of value by coding assistance for those. But this is for the new people. You want to have them too. You might have a new technology and using a stack, and you want to help people to get faster in the learning curve and be productive. But there's also some, of course, we are now on the downslope of the Gen AI hype, if you think about Gartner's curve. So people will, after going through the valley of disillusion, they want to see real value. And the real value is something I like to be quantified more in this area. Somewhere between 8 and 14% for senior developer of productivity increasement. So let's say it's 10%, right? I mean, it's not writing code documentation, it's not writing unit test case. It's the random suggestion of additional code, one function at the time that I don't need to write because it's saying button again, and it can write it for me. It doesn't do the architecture, it doesn't do cloud level thinking, but it still accelerates stuff. I think 10% is still huge if you think it from company point of view, because I'm talking only code generation now, right? You combine that with the other areas, unit test creation, GUI test automation, creating designs automatically, the other agents, the other assistants that help in this agentic workflow, that will compound to much bigger numbers of accelerating. And then it's like, maybe we get into this months, days kind of scenario of UI development, much faster iterations when you put this together. So it is an exciting world. And of course, one of the things in terms of what do I want you to remember is, of course, you need to find the right model. The one model serves all doesn't exist. You need similar again. You need to set your benchmark, find the right models under all considerations. Only output quality doesn't matter. This is not the only factor. You need to think about, does it meet legislation? Do I have a business with 2 years down the road? Can I use multimodal in the EU? So a lot of things you need to figure out in terms of model generation. And then, of course, we all need to learn skills in terms of both how to introduce GenAI to our workflows and the software development, but also then the software developers need to learn new skills. They need to get better at prompting, right? Defining the problem is better. And also product managers need to get better. So we need to learn new skills that are in different places today than they were in the past. And last but not least, let's not forget the users, right? None of this will really happen efficiently if we forget our users in the pipeline. That's it, my takeaway. So it's going to be an exciting world. We're going to see productivity gains from maybe 10% for senior developers. But we need to do a lot of work to actually gain these benefits. And just wanted to give you a couple of ideas of the journey that we have gone through. Thank you.